In this video we will learn how to create 3D motion graphic ads using After Effects. Like this. Hey there, folks. Welcome to Solid Tutorials. This is episode 6 of the After Effects 2023 Complete Tutorial Series. Today, I'll be showing you how to create stunning 3D motion graphics video ads using After Effects, just like this example you saw earlier. In this episode, we've put together a stunning 3D motion graphics video ads for Lay's chips. Please note that this video is not a promotional piece, it's purely for instructional purposes. I'll be walking you through the entire process step by step. And the best part is you won't need any additional plugins. You'll be able to create this on your own and build this valuable skill through this tutorial. Let's dive right in. Start by opening After Effects. In my project panel, I've already imported some images that we'll be using for this motion graphics ad. If you'd like to practice with the same images, you can find free download links for all the files in the description below. First, let's create a new composition and give it a name. I'll call it main. Set the preset to HD 1920 by 1080, and leave the rest of the settings at their defaults. Click OK to create the composition. Now, in the project panel, drag and drop the image of the Lay's chips pack into this composition. Select the image on the timeline and adjust its scale by pressing on your keyboard. I'm setting it to around 60%. Next, right-click on the timeline, go to New, and select Solid. In the solid settings, set the size to 1920 by 1080 and click OK. This will add a solid layer to the timeline. Now, head to the Effects and Presets panel and search for an effect called Gradient Ramp. Drag and drop this effect onto the solid layer. In the Effects Control panel, click on Swap Color. Select Radial Ramp as the ramp shape, and adjust the start and end colors to your liking. This will serve as your background. Feel free to change the background colors whenever you want. Drag this solid layer to the bottom of the timeline. Now, let's bring in some chip and pepper images from the project panel onto the timeline. I'm dragging an image of a bell pepper to start. First, convert this layer to 3D by clicking on the 3D icon. I'll adjust its size by scaling it using this key. You can also fine-tune the size, position, and rotation of the image in the composition window. Repeat this process for other chip and chili images, converting each to 3D and adjusting their properties accordingly. As you make these adjustments, keep an eye on the composition window to ensure everything looks just right. Once you've set up your images as needed in the composition window, it's time to create a camera. Right-click on the timeline, Go to New. And click on Camera. This will open up camera settings. You can name your camera whatever you like. I'll stick with camera. For the camera preset, I'm selecting 35mm and keeping Enable Depth of Field enabled. Leave the rest of the camera settings as default. Drag and drop the camera layer to the top of the timeline. Expand the camera settings and open camera options. Enable depth of field here and set the aperture to 120 and the blur level to 350. Make sure to keep the camera layer as 3D. Parent the camera layer with the first image. Now, duplicate this first image layer by pressing Ctrl+D. Select both of these image layers and press P on your keyboard because we're going to animate them. Move the playhead forward by 2 or 3 seconds on the timeline. Add position keyframes for both layers here. Then move the playhead back to the start and add another position keyframe. In this keyframe, I'll move the position below the chip packet's position. As a result, when the chip packets move, the background images of chips and peppers will also shift accordingly, creating a smooth effect. Now, select all these position keyframes and ease them. You can also use the shortcut F9. With the keyframes selected, click on the graph editor. Select the keyframes and adjust the graph to create a smooth animation with a gradual slowdown. You can set your work area on the timeline and adjust the zoom level as needed. Now, let's animate the background chips and chili images. Select all these images on the timeline and press R on your keyboard to open the rotation properties. Move the playhead to the beginning and add Z rotation keyframes here. Then, for the second keyframe, move the playhead forward by 2 or 3 seconds and add Z rotation keyframes. These keyframes will animate the background chips and peppers. In this second keyframe, I'll adjust the Z rotation values for all the background images to create the desired animation. You can also change the Z rotation while selecting individual images for more precise control. After setting up the rotations for all the background chips and peppers, we'll have an animation like this. Next, ease all these keyframes for a smoother animation. And adjust the animation speed ramp in the graph editor.
She got a body like a goddess, and she talks so sweet. It's like I can't believe I'm the one that she wanted. And if I'm really being honest,
now, let's create another animation. Drag and drop images of 2 chip packs onto the timeline, placing them after the animation of our first chip packet ends. At the start of both chip packet images, add 2 position keyframes. Move the playhead forward by 2 or 3 seconds on the timeline. Then move one chip packet's position from the center to the right and the other from the center to the left. Now, select all these position keyframes and ease them. And fine-tune the animation in the graph editor. Now, animate these 2 chip images back to the center by copying and pasting the position keyframes. You can copy with Ctrl+C and paste with Ctrl+V. You can also copy and paste these keyframes to create new animations or mix different animations. Shorten the duration of all the layers a bit to match the animation's timing. You can always edit keyframe animations as needed. For instance, I'll delete the end keyframes animation and create a new animation where I move the chip packets' positions relative to each other. In the last keyframes, I move both chip packets' positions to the center. Now, let's create a custom potato chips transition. Duplicate the potato chips layer. Drag it to the top. And adjust its length. Scale it to fit the transition duration. We'll animate this potato transition by increasing its size and moving it to the right to make it disappear. Add position keyframes at the start and move the playhead forward a bit. Adding another position keyframe to move it out of the screen. You can adjust the transition layer, keyframes, and animation positions at any time. After doing this, your transition will create an animation like this. Now, let's create more chip pack animations. Drag and drop images of chip packets onto the timeline, placing them after the previous animations. Resize these chip packets by selecting the layers and pressings on your keyboard to access the scale tool. Set them all to 60% scale. Delete any excess parts of these layers. Move these chip layers forward at intervals to create a simple and beautiful animation. And now let's make another animation. This time, we'll animate the chip packets to rotate around the center chip packet. Drag and drop images of one chip packet and 4 chip packets onto the timeline. Scale them down to 30%. And rotate all the images together by 45 degrees. Adjust the positions to place them at the 4 corners of the screen. Change the rotation of 2 of these 4 chip packets to make them look different, rotating them by 135 degrees and converting them to 3D layers. Add Z rotation keyframes at the start and end of the layers. In the last keyframe, change the Z rotation values to rotate about 4.5 times. Ease these keyframes for a smooth animation and adjust the graph in the graph editor to control the animation speed. Enable motion blur on these 4 layers to enhance the effect. For an even more impressive animation, use another technique to rotate these 4 packets together like a fan. Right-click, go to New, and select Null Object. Place this null object layer on top of the chip packets layers and set its duration to match the chip packets. Parent the chip packets layers to the null object layer and enable 3D and motion blur for the null object. Select the null object layer. Press R on your keyboard. And add Z rotation keyframes at the start and end of the layer. Rotate the Z rotation in the second keyframe to create an animation. Ease these keyframes and adjust the graph to control the animation speed. This technique creates a next-level rotation animation that adds a captivating element to your video. You can adjust the rotation values to your liking for different effects. Now, let's add shadows to the chip packets. In the Effects and Presets panel, search for the Drop Shadow effect and apply it to one of the chip pack layers. Adjust the effect settings in the Effects Control panel, setting the softness to 100 and the distance to 50 to create a shadow. To apply the same shadow effect to the other chip images, simply copy the effect by right-clicking and selecting Copy or pressing Ctrl+C. Then, select the other chip images and paste the effect by pressing Ctrl+V. You can paste it on multiple layers or one at a time, depending on your preference. Adjust the layers' lengths to avoid double shadows. Now, let's add some particles to the background. Import a particle video into the project panel and place it above the solid layer. Resize the particles video and set its blending mode to screen to remove the black background. Adjust the opacity to your liking. Split and delete any excess parts of the particles layer to match the animation. Now, let's create one last animation that you'll love. Drag and drop images of 3 chip packets onto the timeline. Split these 3 images, delete the extra layers, and extend the solid layer to match their length. Select the layers of these chip packets and reduce their scale to 60%. Convert these layers to 3D and adjust their positions. Move the first image to the left side. The second to the right. And the third to the left side, all moving out of the screen. Add position keyframes for all 3 layers at the start, and then move the playhead forward by a second or so to add position keyframes for the second positions. In these keyframes, move the positions to create animation. Now, select all these position keyframes and ease them. Adjust the graph in the graph editor to fine-tune the animation speed. To create a more dynamic effect, separate the durations of these three layers by moving them slightly apart. Equalize the lengths of all layers in the end. Now, let's add a second potato chips transition at the beginning of this final animation. Copy the same potato chips transition we created earlier by pressing Ctrl+C and paste it at the start of this final animation with Ctrl+V. Adjust the transition as needed. If you want to make it different, you can reverse the transition by swapping the positions of the keyframes. Now, copy the drop shadow effect once again and paste it onto the chip packets at the end. Make sure to adjust the layer's length. With all these animations in place, let's move on to adding text, sound effects, and background music to enhance our motion graphics advertisement. To add animated text, create a new composition with a preset of 1920 by 1080 and a duration of 5 to 10 seconds. You can write your desired text. I'll go with Lays. Select the pen tool. Create a mask over the text. And duplicate the text layer. In the bottom layer's text properties, select Subtract for the mask. Now, with both layers selected, press P to add position keyframes at the start. Move the playhead forward by about a second and add another set of position keyframes. Adjust the positions of both text layers to create a split animation. Select all the keyframes, ease them, and refine the animation in the graph editor. For an added touch, apply a drop shadow effect to the top text layer. Adjusting the settings to your preference.
So please don't stay the night.
Duplicate the effect. Slightly lower the opacity. And adjust the settings for a subtle shadow animation.
It's been a long time, I've been waiting for you. I got my feelings up and it's just for you. I just need a little bit of time to breathe in and out. I just need a little bit of time to ease up my mind. All for you. Situation got me running like I'm losing my mind.
Now, bring this text composition into your main composition by dragging and dropping it onto the timeline. Adjust the position and size of the text layer as needed and split and delete any excess layers. With all these elements in place, it's time to add sound effects and background music. Import your audio files into the project panel. And drag them onto the timeline. You can arrange them as desired. And there you have it. Your motion graphics advertisement is now ready for a preview. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this tutorial helpful in creating your own stunning 3D motion graphics video ads in After Effects. If you have any questions or need further assistance, feel free to ask. Enjoy creating.